Everyone. I'm Dr. Phaedra Livingstone, Coordinator of Museum Studies and Assistant Professor in the Arts and Administration program here. And last summer, the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art launched a competitive academic support a grant program, and the 21st Century Museum Issues public lecture series is one of the inaugural projects in that program. I'm very pleased to be working with the JSMA on this project and to launch the series today with a presentation by noted museologist Gail Anderson. I'm also very grateful for the additional financial and in-kind support offered for the series by the School of Architecture and Allied Arts, the UO Curation and Interpretation Research Interest Group, the AAA Graduate Certificate in Museum Studies, the Center for Community Arts and Cultural Policy, the Arts and Administration Program, and the Literary Duck. I'd like to extend particular thanks to Jill Hartz, Sharon Kaplan, Lisa Abia-Smith, Diane Nelson, and Debbie Williamson of the JSMA, and to AAD grad students Lexi Grant and Tracy Bell for their assistance. Thank you very much. This series of public lectures is being presented as part of a course I teach called Museum Theory, with the intention of exposing museology students and the general public to emerging theory, practice, and debates in the field. Like other public institutions, museums are facing multiple pressures to adapt to rapid changes. The natures of museum professions are changing, as are public expectations for museum visits and the perceived role of museums as a social good. Following today's lecture, we'll have a discussion period and a book signing, and I invite you all to participate actively. On Friday, February 1st at 11, please join us again for a panel on capitalizing collections. And on Tuesday, February 26th at 3 p.m., please join us as John Falk and Lynn Deerking discuss the latest research on the museum visitors experience. Now more about today's speaker. Gail Anderson is president of Gail Anderson Associates, which she founded in 2002 with the goal of helping cultural and social service organizations position themselves for greatest relevancy and success in today's complex world. Her firm specializes in facilitating institutional planning, governance and leadership development, community and civic engagement, institutional capacity building, and providing professional development and education services. Funded by a grant from the Oregon Cultural Trust, the JSMA is currently working with Gail on a plan to increase engagement with Latino communities. I am extremely grateful that Gail was willing to coordinate this lecture with the timing of a site visit for that project. Thank you for being very flexible and for helping our budget. With over 35 years of professional experience, Gail brings an extensive knowledge and understanding of museums, current issues, creative solutions, and diverse strategies for institutional success. Before beginning her own consulting business, she was deputy director of the Mexican Museum in San Francisco, vice president of the museum management consultants firm, chair of the graduate department of museum studies at John F. Kennedy University, assistant director of the Southwest Museum, and museum educator at the Museum of Northern Arizona. Currently, she's also a member of the consulting network, the Museum Group. She's offered ample professional service throughout her career as a past board member of the American Alliance of Museums, as a member of the committee that produced the highly influential 1992 report, Excellence and Equity, and as a past president of the Western Museums Association Board of Directors. She's received the Director's Chair Award for Distinguished Service and Leadership from the Western Museums Association. Gail continues her commitment to advancing the field through frequent speaking engagements, writing, and teaching. She edited the best-selling books Museum Mission Statements, Building a Distinct Institutional Identity, published by AAM in 1998, and Reinventing the Museum, published in 2004. Both books have been reissued in second editions. And I think it's very telling that only 13 of the 45 essays in the second edition of Reinventing the Museum, you can see a copy here, were also found in the first edition. This significantly reworked book was published last year and is the inspiration for today's presentation. Please give her a very warm welcome.
First of all, can you hear me? What are you doing here at 3 in the afternoon? Who's got coffee? I was saying 3 in the afternoon is when I sort of get unplugged. So Sharon, wherever she is, grateful she dashed out to get some coffee. Well, I'm thrilled that you're here. I have a huge soft spot for graduate students from my JFK years, and I always love to talk and engage with audiences about members of the community? Members of the community? Oh, thank you for coming. Thank you, I really appreciate that. And docents or volunteers? And anyone from the Leadership Advisory Council for the museum? Wow, great. Thank you very much for coming. All right, so let's get started. If at any time you can't hear me and I get too excited and I'm over there and I forget this, you just remind me. I'm not going to be able to stand still. When I first did the original Reinventing the Museum, it was in 2004, and Phaedra, you totally picked up on the issue, which is when I went back to redo it, the publisher said, oh, Gail, this won't be a very big project. The second edition's never that big. It's always the odd numbers. Wrong. So much had been written, so much had changed, that 75% of this book is new, and there are more essays than they were than the first one. This is an anthology. This anthology is about the shifting thinking about the role of museums in society, and it has 5 sections. And you'd think I'd have this memorized, but I'm going to cheat. So first section is my framework, where I outline the whole reinventing tool and thinking. 20th century dialogue, starting with John Cotton Dana, moving into the emerging 21st century ideology, then perspectives on meaningful public engagement. 4th section, shifting frameworks and infrastructures, and then implications for leadership. Why did I do a book like this? And I think this comes from teaching and being in the field. I really feel that if you're in the museum field, you should know the good and the great thinkers. And they're in here. They're there in other places too. But a lot of the pieces that are picked for this are iconic. John Falk is in here. You're going to be hearing from him in a week or two. Nina Simon, a real go-getter who's changing it up big time with her new thinking about how to engage the public. The pieces, like for example in the front part of the book, first section, Amalia Mesa Baines, an incredibly powerful piece about the importance of inclusion, and beautifully stated. You know, the individuals in here are very powerful thinkers, and I ask you to do a couple things for me if you have a chance to look at it. Let me know if you have ideas for the next edition. But just for the record, I just finished it. I don't want to do the next one really soon. I need a break. If you find any of them challenging or not necessarily as poignant as you'd like, I'd like to know that too. There are a couple from the first edition that were, you know, they were ousted because of feedback from folks like you. So this book will be really the framework of today's conversation. Oh, can you okay. And does that thing go away? All right. All right. So here's a little bit of the outline of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk first about how the paradigm for museums has changed and why it is essential that we pay attention to it. And I'm going to talk about just some ideas and things that I've observed from working with clients and talking to colleagues. When I get into reinventing, I'm going to talk to you about the tool that I developed, and we'll take a little time as a group to work through that. Up in institutional reflection, I have some other interesting, I hope thought-provoking tools that I've used with clients to help them get an understanding of their position within the community and the marketplace. We'll go down and talk about the role of leadership, which is essential. Without leadership, nothing is going to happen. A lot of people say it's about finance. It's first and foremost about leadership. because with vision, ideas, and passion, a lot of things can happen, and with the right positioning, the money will come. We'll then go over to strategic toolkit, and I'll talk a little bit about how really it's a lot about strategic thinking and strategic tools to do your work. And then I'm going to go back to the central circle and talk about some examples of some reinvented institutions and close out with some parting thoughts. For those movie buffs, that's the Back to the Future car in the middle there for reinventing. And so the concept of reinventing, the tool that I'll talk about in a little bit. As a Western-based concept, the museum, there are lots of assumptions and ideological framework that we have used for a long time to form the way we create our museums, operate them, and engage the public. Through my work, I've really identified characteristics that I see as critical to the reinvented museum. And as I said, we'll go into that. Well, if you don't challenge your own assumptions, and if you don't take a look at what's really changing in the world, your ability as a museum to survive will be marginalized. And I'm here to tell you, I think a lot of museums are in trouble. So, I'm here, I'm your ally, I'm your friend, but I'm concerned. I see a lot of institutions going at things with the same old cycle and not questioning their philosophy and their place in the world, because the world has changed. So let's talk about that. The new paradigm. These are just 5 characteristics about our world and how it's changed. You might likely add some, and you very much would add some, no doubt, for Eugene and the state of Oregon and the Northwest, distinct from where I live now, which is Northern California. Our state is the 8th largest economy in the world. We have 37 to 38 million people in our state. I have to tell you a funny story. I was up doing work in Canada. The whole country is 37 million. I'm from a state of 37 million. But anyway, so the point about demographics and population shifts. Here in Oregon, you are getting a huge shift of Latino population moving in. Things are changing. You are starting to experience some things we've experienced in California a while ago. Your world is definitely shifting, and it's not the only population that you have here. Demographics, aging society. Now, I'm of course the exception. I'm not aging, but at least I'm hoping I'm not aging. But that bubble, the baby boomer bubble moving up, is a very significant impact on how we think about our institutions and how we're engaging. And it's a very discerning population and expects a lot. Meanwhile, we have the young generation. Some of you here in this room, I have a 15-year-old. Trust me, I'm looking at that one on a regular basis. Completely engaged in the world through technology. Her view of the world has been shaped completely differently than mine. I had to learn how to use a computer. No, what were they, Alice? They were electric typewriters, then word processor. I'm really much younger than I'm sounding right now. But learning all those various forms of technology, this is second nature to her. So if we don't use that technology, we're not going to be able to reach that audience. It's just that simple. Nick Honeysett, who's a great mind from the Getty, shared with a group of us at the Western Museums Association a blog that said, "Museums suck," written by a 15-year-old. Kind of laid out all the reasons that museums were not with it and not engaging that audience. We cannot stick our heads in the sand and not pay attention to that. So I'll get at a little bit at why we have to pay attention to audiences. Global interconnectedness. Amazing, all that happened in the Middle East just a matter of months ago. We were there. We knew within minutes things that happened in Egypt and then all the other things that unfolded. We are not removed from that. You might have a protest down the street in Eugene. So are you going to not pay attention to that? Oh, that's something that happens in town. It's not part of our museum or what we do. I challenge you to think a little differently about that. What is the pulse that's going on politically and economically and otherwise? Technology and social media. Oh my. I can go, as I say, to the Louvre in my pajamas at 2 in the morning if I feel like it, right? I can shop online. I can look anything up I want to look up. I can talk to someone on the other side of the world in that virtual zone. I can do Skype. It's not about me. Anybody can do those things. So that access is 24/7, 365 days a year. Again, I see some museums that are timid around technology, not necessarily engaging in it. And if technology doesn't become part of everybody's job, it's everybody's business to understand technology, I think that's going to be a real detriment to the institution. And I'm not saying every audience is going to respond that way. Some audiences, I love it when I work with trustees, and they say, well, we've got 3 or 4, and they actually still don't use email, so we have to mail the minutes to them. Okay, well, let's respect them, but for the bulk of our society, that is our regular means. Our iPhones, and Nick, when he was talking in Palm Springs, was saying, and I am guilty of this, I hadn't thought of it. How many of us put our iPhones next to our bed at night when we go? Oh, mine can't be the only one. All right, good. All right, yeah. I hadn't thought of it, but I do, and I like check the time in the middle of the night, and anyway. Economic volatility. 2001, when we experienced what happened in New York and 9/11, which then reverberated, impacted many, many things connected to donors, financial viability of businesses. It impacted all of us. One act was like a ripple effect. Then in 2008, we had another period of time with economic stress. You have to assume that the economic picture will continue to change. What is the engine, your economic engine, how is it set up to respond to that sort of thing? What do you have in reserves in case you hit one of those deep pits where the resources are harder to come by? I think that's, some people even predict that that's really not going to kind of calm down till 2015, and even when it does, I still think our world's going to look different. And again, we could add more to this list, but of course I love being in Eugene. I'm from Vermont originally. We always kind of thought of you guys as our West Coast sibling, environmental. Remember, we were recycling before anybody else was? But this is a serious, serious aspect. I refer to some museums who keep building new buildings. Well, what is this? How are you supporting this new building that you're expanding? Where are the resources that you are going to find, both financial and otherwise, to keep that building up and operating? We have to ask different questions. And in many cases, I think some of the questions come down to looking at our attitude and the way we engage with the public. So I've talked a little bit about this. This backdrop has changed, so it means our assumptions need to change. One assumption, and I'll talk more about that later, this has turned out to be a really good tool to use with institutions to ask them what their operative assumptions are. One assumption that many museums work with is they will come to us. Nope. Ditch it. Yes, some of them will come to you, but they're going to come to you through your website or they're going to come to you in other ways. If you think that way, if you think the only way they're going to engage is through exhibits, I beg to differ. I think that these assumptions need to be looked at and new ones need to be formulated. Now, I'll get at this a little bit when I talk about leadership later, but the shift of the 21st century, and you've seen the IMLS, that the students, I think, have seen the skills and what are mapped out beautifully in that publication. Institute of Museum and Library Services out of DC. Flexibility. What does that look like? How many museums do we know where, oh my gosh, we need the whole schedule mapped out 3 years in advance? Gotta lock it down. How many know museums like that? Okay. How do you then respond to something that happens right in your backyard? Well, all the gallery space is taken, or all the program time has been allotted. I propose that museums leave windows, deliberate windows, and I know this is going to be hard, because I know museum people, because I'm one of them. The temptation to fill that gap is going to be hard not to fill. But if every minute is accounted for, you cannot respond to the issues right in front of you. At the Oakland Museum, Occupy Oakland, the chairs, they came and they were occupying right in front of the museum. Well, they actually had to close. I guess it got a little dicey with the police. This is an opportunity to talk about that sort of issue. If you're not flexible and everything's so locked down, then you don't have that ability. Financial acumen. It's not okay to not understand how a budget goes together. It's not okay to not know what it costs to do business. Do you know what it costs to put on, I don't know, let's call it a festival? Do you understand all the direct costs for that? Do you understand all the indirect costs? For the security, for the lights, for the building to be up, all of that. For many years, I've watched museums talk about programs for the just out-of-pocket component, and they don't really understand the cost of doing business. And if you start to divide it by the number of people that come, it's scary what they're spending per person to participate. This is no longer a choice. And risk-taking. Well, I don't mean scary risk-taking without, some knowledge and information, but risk-taking. We got to be in the lab of life. We've got to be trying things. We've got to create environments in our museums where we can explore with the community, out in the community, and engage with them in the way we go about our work. I still see a lot of, constrained, we need to do it this way because we've always done it this way. Capacity of the institution capacity of an institution to manage change is a requirement. It's constant. And capacity, I'm going to get at that a little bit later, is another area where I think there is not enough understanding of the capacity to run a museum. What does that really cost? And when you take on a new initiative or do something, have you really looked at what that's going to mean to the whole institution? And then relevancy, audiences. It's a constant. And it's not about guessing. What do you know about your audience? What do you know about their experience? What do you know about the people that aren't coming? And that's market research, and it's something that is really critical for museums to embrace on a much more regular basis. So, what does this mean for the institution? By the way, how's everybody doing? Is it getting warm in here, or is it just me? Don't say it's just me. Is it possible to get a little air? Everybody's okay? All right. All right, can't do much about it. All right. So, some ideas. To survive in this shifting paradigm, you have to ensure clarity of the role of the institution in the contemporary world. It can't be inward-looking. It needs to be outward-looking. What is the place of that museum within the community? how does that museum contribute to the vitality of the community? And I'll say this again, it's not about us being museums, it's about them. So whenever you find yourself kind of thinking internally, open it up, think outwardly. Place communities and audiences at the center. Everything you do. Collecting. You do that, I'd like to think, if you're really honest with yourself, you're collecting it because of the ability to communicate an idea, an experience, or part of a culture with the outside world. So you need to, it's not just hoarding, although I think we might know people that work in museums, and it is about hoarding. But we're not going to cover that territory completely today. Who in your institution, be attentive to external trends, who's keeping an eye on that? How often do you talk about it? Is it only once a year at the annual retreat? Or do you have a whiteboard or something where people go, I just read something online, or there's a really cool article in Bloomberg, or there's in Wired magazine, or whatever you look at, that it's a new trend, or there's something to pay attention to. Now sometimes it's not necessarily going to change anything, but you start to get, it's a new habit. And I'll share an example with you later, but it's a habit we need to get into doing. At the American Alliance of Museums in DC, they have a Center for the Future of Museums, and they've got a whole activity about looking at future trends and their implications. I think you can participate in that within your museum. Collaborate. Collaboration is time-consuming, I grant you that. But the idea that every institution operates on its own, it's over. That doesn't mean you have to collaborate on everything, but you could collaborate on some things. I know of some museums that are sharing HR help. I'm going to share some examples later this afternoon where they're actually collectively reducing the carbon footprint of the museums through shared a relationship with a gas and electric company, which I think is that's what we should be doing. And I've mentioned this before, but how are you a partner for the vitality of your community? Give me a top issue going on in Eugene right now. If I open the paper, what might I find? Homeless. Okay. How might museums participate in the issue that Alice just mentioned about homelessness? I don't know. I'm not sitting here with the answer. I'm not trying to be a know-it-all. But if you're turning your back on that, and then you wonder why the community isn't coming, I think you have to be a part of the community. Alice has probably heard me tell this story, but I was at a conference in Ontario, Canada, and this guy, Paul Bourne, he runs, Tamarisk Institute, and they go around the world and they go to communities and they help solve problems. And at these sort of tables, Boys and Girls Club, the mayor might be there, might be a church, priest from a local church, and others. So he's standing there getting ready to do his talk. And he looked at us and he said, I'm really glad you invited me, but I'm not sure why, because for 20 years I've been doing this. There's never been a museum at the table. And I could hardly hear anything else he said, because they don't think of us museums, as part of the bigger solution. I think that that's something we need to change in our thinking, and that it's not just, community outreach. That's a common way to think about reaching out. It's like, well, we're going to go out in the community and we'll do a program. That's different stuff. That's different from problem solving on behalf of the community. And then technology, I mentioned that earlier. You need to really think of that holistically in an integrated way for your institution. Internally, clarifying assumptions and principles. I talked a little bit about it. I'll tell you a funny story. I was working with, in this case, a symphony, And I said, we need to really talk about your assumptions for your business model. And I said, please just let it roll, don't edit yourself. Give me an example of an assumption. And this lady, her hair may have been on the blue side, I'm not sure. Totally cute. I love little old ladies, I just do. Anyway, she said, oh, well, we just sit around and we just hope that somebody, an angel, swoops in and gives us a big chunk of money, and then we're all set for the rest of the year. We laugh, but a lot of times that's not very far from the truth. I love that she had the courage to say it, but can we agree that this would not be a good assumption to run your institution by? So this is a very interesting idea for you, if you're working in a museum or whatever. Do a list of what your assumptions are now. What assumptions are you operating your museum with now? And what are the assumptions, or what do they need to be for you to be a 21st century museum? Think about it. Healthy, it gets people talking. We don't talk about these things enough. So an idea there. I'm going to share an example of principles later. Next one is about strategic thinking. It's more about that than strategic planning. I do strategic planning, so I've thought about it a lot. I'm a fan of it. I'm a fan of it mostly because it gets issues on the table. It gets people talking about, well, what are we really about anyway? What's our mission? The mission should be about what you do to impact the future, not a list of we collect, interpret, and research. Those are activities. How do you change the world? What is your place in changing the world? So strategic thinking. So if your mission statement as a starter isn't very strategic and positioned, then your ability to have strategic thinking in the institution will be limited. So what am I talking about? What the heck is she talking about? So you have this nice, tidy little plan, and you have the mission, the values, the vision, and the things that you're going to do. Okay, you put it to bed, the board adopts it, everybody's happy, and good work has happened. Scroll forward about a month. Some big idea comes down the pike. Lisa, I'm going to pick on you. Lisa goes to a staff meeting. Lisa is from the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. She's my guinea pig for the moment. She goes to the staff meeting. She goes, oh, I got this great idea. And I think we should do it. Whoa, time out. Well, if we do that, and we've already adopted our budget, what are we not going to do? And let's see, does that really help advance the different audiences we're trying to reach? Where does it fit in the matrix of programs and things we're doing for the public? So that it's perfectly fine and good that she brings it to the table, but there has to be due diligence on the part of the institution and the people around the table to process it and determine what's good. I see a lot of, ooh, good idea, and then you do it, and then you pay for the consequences later. You don't have enough staff, you don't have the financial resources, maybe don't even have the space to do it. So, really important. Business models. It's in my suitcase. Oh, shoot. I have there's called Business Model Generations. Wonderful book that talks about business models in new ways, because a business model is not just a financial stream, it's what kind of business are you in, what are you trying to do with the public, it's this whole mix. And it's graphically illustrated, it's a great book, I recommend it. But we need to talk about what kind of business are we in. We act like we're a museum, therefore we'll have collections, we'll put on exhibits. Well, what business are we really in? And that connects to some of my other ideas. I just talked about the offer the right mix of programs. I have a tool I'll share with you. I have an example later of a 21st century organizational culture, or structure. Most of our museum structures are still, there's the education column, there's the marketing, everything's sort of in columns and isolated. Well, 21st century, to be flexible, responsive, and integrated, that model doesn't work. And so I'm going to share with you an interesting model on that. And then I talk about tools. One of the ways, to go back to my example, picking on Lisa, who I adore, is that if that institution has a decision-making tool or some matrix to use, there may be a vehicle to kind of vet, maybe pretty quickly, or then, you know, Jill and the other staff members go, you know, why don't you drill down on that and find out what are the real costs and how does it fit in, because it's kind of intriguing. It might really help what we're trying to do. So, if you need to stand up and stretch at any time, please feel free. Oh, good, I have an exercise for you. Perfect timing. So, would you, now, you didn't know how many were coming. I love that there's so many of you. We have how many? 35? This is my reinventing tool. So why don't we, every other person will get one. And I can, Phaedra has it. She could email it to you if you're interested. All right, so we've now talked a little bit about the paradigm shift, and going around is this reinventing tool. And I'm just going to show it to you visually here. So you'll see the traditional column and the reinvented column. And I'm going to have you engage in an exercise here in a minute. There are 4 sections. One's governance, one is management strategies, and one is communication, okay? I like to use this tool, or I'm a resourceaholic. I won't like to share things. It might be a way to start a conversation with your institution. And here's what you do. You look at, let's look at collection-driven versus audience-focused. Do you see that one on your piece of paper? So you might say, let me try to think of an institution. Well, a good example is not coming to mind at the moment. But let's say it's an institution where collections, it's all about the collections. So you might say, well, where are we now in our attitude about our institution being collection driven? So, oh boy. Things are zipping along here. You might put the X kind of in there. Okay? This isn't about right or wrong, it's about being alert. And you might say, given what we know about the world and how it's changing, given what we know about our community, given what we know about the issues, we may not want to be completely only about the audience, but we want to move over a little bit. That's where we want to head. If you want to head there, then you have to change your practices. You have to change your priorities. Does that make sense? All right. So this, let me just talk quickly about it, and then I'll give you an exercise, and you can stand up and stretch or whatever. So this one about institutional values, here's a favorite one of mine. Voice of authority. We are the museum. We are the all-knowing. This, if we put it up, it is the truth. It's real. You know, we're the voice of God or whatever. No, it's an opinion about something, right? Multiple viewpoints. Lots of institutions have tried this and, experimenting. Well, if we look at, let's say, how Native American populations have been in Oregon over time, well, there's the anthropologist point of view. There are the viewpoints of the elders of the various tribes. There are the viewpoints of maybe city mothers and fathers. I'd like to hear them all. I think it would be interesting. Versus what the tendency, and traditional, by the way, we're talking many cases 19th century. Unfortunately, you can still go into institutions that exist in the 21st century, and that's their guiding principle. All right, so let's go to the next batch. This is very cool, this little thing. So, governance. I know, I should get out more. All right, here's a classic. individual vision. It is not good if the whole spirit, direction of an institution rests with one person. That could be the president of the board, or it could be the director of the museum. No, not good. You want to share that. You want that to be adopted as on an institutional level. Venerability versus humility. This is a time for museums to have an enormous amount of humility, for directors to have humility, for staff to have humility, for you are facilitators, right? Facilitators. That is a different mindset. Okay, whoops. And then management strategies. I talked a little bit about this, hierarchical structure versus learning organization, which is a little more fluid, a little less, linear. Segregated functions versus integrated, that's another way of looking at that. Inwardly driven versus responsive to stakeholders. I mean, on a lot of cases, I'm working and observing museums who are moving. Their institution is changing. It's exciting to see that. And then the last one is about communication. As a visitor, you will look at this first, and then you'll go look at that. And then you'll go around the room and you're going to look at that. And you're going to have fun. And you're like, really? Well, wouldn't you rather have some choices? Wouldn't you like some orientation so you could decide where you're going to go and how you're going to experience it? This one gets at what I said earlier, keeper of knowledge versus exchange of knowledge. And the bad part about we're the all-knowing is that people come in and they feel like they feel stupid. They feel like their viewpoint doesn't count. Even if they don't know about a topic, their opinion most definitely matters. In fact, sometimes that can be where the most exciting interchange and exchange can happen. So here's your assignment. First, let's see, here until this row, you're going to do values. Here back, you're going to do governance. Well, don't start yet. I know you're very good students. From here forward to Alice's row, you're going to do management strategies. And from you back, you're going to do communications. All right, so what am I going to ask you to do? I've got this one up. So the back group. You're going to work with the person sitting next to you, right? You're going to think in terms of a museum you've either worked in or that you know, right? You'll talk about that, or at least what I'm interested in is hearing you process this and see if this is a helpful tool. Tell me your name. Katie. So Katie and Jennifer. So they decide they want to do debate, discussion, and dialogue, and they pick, I don't know, the High Desert Museum, for just to pull one out of a hat. And so what you're going to talk about is your sense of what it feels like there now. And and I'm hoping that's a place where you've worked, because it's a little hard to do it if you're not on the inside. But where would you want it? Where are you trying to go? Now, I'm going to share some work that they're doing later. They're really trying to head toward dialogue, and they're working hard on it. Now, I've got some interesting stuff to share. So pick one pair of words in the section I assigned you, and just identify where this institution is and where it wants to go, and then I'll pick one from each group to just share your aha moments. I'm going to pray to God that there's an aha moment out there somewhere, but anyway. So I'm going to give you like all of 5 minutes, because I'm very generous. 5 minutes, okay? Go. Okay, let's wrap it up. And we don't have, you know that I can spend hours on this with an institution. You can only imagine that whole process, but it can be very rich. So who is willing to share their example from institutional values? I've forgotten who I gave that assignment to. You guys. That was no, you don't want to do it? Anybody, any volunteer? Yeah, go.
Yes, since we're both from the community, we chose collection-driven versus or moving toward audience-focused.
Okay,
And this museum, of course, began with this museum, the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art, which used to be the University of Oregon Museum of Art, was started as really a bequest from Gertrude Bass Warner, who was interested in Asian art of a particular period. And so we have a lot of materials from that period. And today we have, in this community, many Asian people who are not of that generation or are not focused on that particular historical epoch or those previous historical epochs.
Asia is huge.
Yes, yes. Yes, so we thought that a good way to sort of move this across the spectrum would be to focus more on Japanese manga, anime, technical arts, graphic arts of contemporary period, so that it's not just the scrolls and the traditional arts of the Asian collection which Gertrude Bass Warner collected.
So if I hear you right, I'm going to borrow that back. So what I heard is you talked a little bit about the origin, which is very important to embrace the history and how an institution began. It's critical. So it started with a focus, but you're saying to be able to become more, you tell me if I've got this right, more audience receptive driven is to, if not collect, present more contemporary examples of, you used anime as, like my daughter would come see that. That would be very good. She's 15. So, okay. Questions for their quick discourse? Do you want to add?
Yes, sort of. That we have a lot of Asians in this community, contemporary Asians, and we thought that it would something that would appeal to them, and interpreting the collection for them, just like we do Western art for us. We have Cambodians and Koreans and Chinese and Japanese.
Just an idea. What about putting various objects out or inviting community in to do their interpretation? Not your interpretation of it, but their interpretation of it, and or community conversations about their sense of issues that this museum might be very well positioned to.
Also, museums in their country with
That's right.
they've experienced, and then coming over here and experiencing
Okay.
their objects in our setting.
Right. And we know, for example, in Native American culture, the whole idea of an object in a museum setting is very at odds with core values. All right. Who had, thank you. Who would like to share a pair that they did in the governance group? I guess that's the back group. Come on, brave. Oh, good. We are a very friendly crowd.
Yeah.
So what pair did you pick?
We chose the reactive versus proactive form of government. Yes, we chose the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. The Jordan Schnitzer. Well, it's just we're a little familiar with that. So we feel that the goal is, of course, to move towards a more proactive approach. So we wondered what that would mean for us and what that would look like. And we think it would mean less kind of reacting to what's going on in the immediate day to day, and including maybe working in some time for some breathing space and time to be more proactive about what will be happening. So just working more time into our planning, some wiggle room into our planning. Am I getting it right, Diane? You want to jump in there?
It's sort of like being able to step back and take a look around so that you can see what to respond to, rather than just reacting to everything that just keeps coming at you. And that also includes taking a look at the audience, the people that come here, so that we can respond to their needs as they're happening in a creative way.
I'm only just getting to know this institution, and I hope you want to keep me around. That, and again, not there's so much we don't know, but you can imagine that would really spur a shift in the organizational culture. And by the way, this reactive versus proactive is a very common challenge for museums. Very common. But to move toward that means it means change. It means a shift in thinking and the way you approach your work. Questions for them? What did I give you guys? Okay, I'm going to have you hold on a second. Up to the front, next one was management. Do I have a volunteer? 2 volunteers? All right.
Yeah, we also picked on the JSMA. So, Chelsea, you want to talk about it?
So we're going to think of this as community feedback.
Which one was it again? Yeah, it was assumptions about audiences and knowledge about audiences.
Mm-hmm. We specifically talked about student groups and engaging student groups. It's a problem that Sam and I have been wrestling with for some time, because even as students, we don't know how to get our, companions involved in the museum. And I wonder if part of it has to do with the sensory overload experience of higher education, that you come to a museum for an experience, but you have 50 experiences and homework assignments that you haven't done.
Why don't you create a place for them to do homework in the museum?
That,
Now, let me
yeah,
tell you,
that's
we tend to think about things. Oh, wait, I'm going to.
well. That's how the students do engage with the museum. They come to the cafe. They do homework. They meet with professors.
So an idea would be to, when people come to the cafe, to give them something that they can then bring. You can bring someone to the museum who's not a student. In other words, you give them a free pass, a guest pass that they can share, because students come for free. Another thought was the LA County Museum of Art now has this program where any kid up to the age of 17 can be a member for free. All you have to do is sign up. And once you're a member, you can bring an adult for free, one adult, every time you visit. So I thought that might be a good incentive for students.
Open swiping and stealing of ideas from other museums is completely okay. Don't quote me on that one. That's what we do. So, but that whole idea about knowledge about audiences, let me share another example. So I was going back to that symphony where that cute little lady made that comment. And they said, well, we want you to do a community conversation. I said, okay. And they said they wanted to be there. We had to talk about that because I wanted the community to be open. I said, okay, you can't say anything till maybe the very, very, very end. And their response was, well, we want to know what they think about this symphony, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, it's about finding out about them. What makes them tick? What ideas give them passion? Where are they spending their time? There were 2 guys that got completely into the Chicana movement. It was fascinating, and they were throwing barbs across the table and just riffing on that. It was fantastic. And as we moved toward, so they felt respected, and we were listening, we were engaged, we were all leaning forward and asking questions. And then when we got toward the end, to ask, well, as you know, you have the symphony here, and we have some questions about ways to engage your audience. They were full of ideas. However, the thing that's tricky there is you've got to then honor them, and you don't have to do them all, but you need to at least do one or two. Otherwise, it's insulting. I say this to my husband sometimes when he asks for my opinion. And I give it to him. And then apparently he doesn't really want it. And I'm like, if you don't want it, don't ask for it. I mean, it's very personal. But anyway, so the same thing with your community, right? You know, please, you know, if you want it, great. So you've really got to ask yourself, are we opening up our institution to this? Is this matter? And by the way, it's not the responsibility of one person to go talk to that community. It has to be embraced by the whole institution. Okay, the very, very patient communication gang. Who is going to jump in here? And by the way, thank you, Alice, and to your partner there. Okay, pass that down.
Okay, we picked Keeper of Knowledge and Exchange of Knowledge. And the institution we talked about was the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. And we were just looking at it in terms of their programming and how the MA has kind of become a facilitator and invites community collaborators to come in and lead a lot of their programming, if not most of it. And so it's much more of an exchange, and that's represented a lot in the museum's mission and the programming's mission, which is to be much more community collaborative and centric.
So what's your takeaway from just taking a few minutes with this? Was that helpful? What's helpful about it?
I can see doing this with a board, you know. I can see doing this with a board. I'm president of a board. I can see doing this with them.
It's not like it's a door opener. It's a conversation starter, because you see there aren't any X's there. Everything doesn't have to be along the right side. It's about being clear where you are and where you're trying to go. Okay, great job. All right. How's it? It's 4. I'm going to try to be done the next 15 minutes. Can you hang in there with me? You're good? Okay. All right. So I just want to talk a little bit about leadership, which is probably one of my favorite topics. It has to be mission driven, okay? You've got to have, first of all, you need to have a really good mission. And I can share a story about the California Academy of Sciences. And do you remember Leighton Taylor? Some of you do? Yeah, that's right, that's right. Wonderful guy. And he would, when Lisa was in the Museum Studies program at JFK, he would come in and he'd talk about their mission. And he said, the people, how many of you have been to the California Academy of Sciences? Okay, so you're a little bit familiar with it. They just renovated, completely renovated, and they have like a living roof now. And at any rate, when Leighton was there, they hadn't done the renovation. And he said that a lot of people on the staff said, our role is to teach people about science. Now, to teach people about science. What do you pick up with that one right away? Us to you poor, unwashed people who don't know anything about science. I mean, you know. But he said, no, it's to help adults and children understand the natural world and their place within it. Ah. That's interesting. That shifts it. So you go and you see the big diorama, you'd expect some kind of label, not like it's frozen in time, but what do you see here but and then what's happening in this ecosystem now? What issues? And if there are species that are no longer living, then you've got to talk about it. You can't, sweep it under the rug. And then how do we, as people who vote and make choices, how do we impact that? The new director said their mission is, how did we get here? How do we stay? Love it. Love it. It makes it open. It makes it curious. It makes it, a whole inquiry process. Shared. Leadership is everywhere. It's obviously the CEO. It's all of the staff have a leadership role. All of the volunteers have a leadership role. The board. It is shared. It is not in the hands of one person. It needs to be nurtured throughout the institution. Empowering. How do you empower staff to exercise their leadership role? It means you've got to actually spell it out or make it clear enough so they understand what it looks like and how can they do that and know that the environment will support it. Transparent. I can't tell you, I've been in museums where I'm interviewing, at the front end of playing or whatever, and I meet staff who don't know what the budget is. It's like crippling. It's like tying an arm behind. How are they supposed to be leaders and support the future of the institution if they don't understand their own budget, they aren't a participant in creating it and monitoring it? Transparent. Strategic, I talked a lot about that. I talked about humble. I think courageous. I think museums need to be courageous. I think that people should think of museums as the leaders, a source of leadership in our community. How many noticed that in the poem read at the inauguration they mentioned museums? I almost jumped off the couch. I'm like, oh, it was great. Anyway, but it was in there. I'm like, okay, committed. Trying to make sure that you guys don't all. So now I'm repeating, there are a couple of threads here, no doubt you've got them now. I call it looking under the hood. And I think a lot of work is spent on how do we do a good exhibit, how do we make the visitor area better, but this stuff underneath is not looked at. Now, I've talked a lot about operative assumptions. I won't go over that again. Clarify terminology. Oh, Lordy. So you're working with an institution, even words like community. What do you mean when you say community relative to our institution? And what do I mean? We may not be on the same page. You actually need to define these things, the critical terms, and some of them can be very, very basic. Throw out a word that comes to mind that you might want to define for your museum or a museum you've worked with. Yes. Another one? Diversity. Yep. Good. Culture, diversity. Excellent. Orienting principles. I'm going to share an example there. The organizational culture, I've talked a little bit about that. You need to define and talk about parameters of work and defining success. Most work in museums ought to be happening in mixed teams. And what does success look like? Have you defined it? If it's not defined, then there's a good chance you're going to miss the mark. Not because anybody's bad or not doing a good job, but I think it's really important to define those steps and how you define success. Lori Fogarty, I'm going to talk a little bit about her example here in a minute, was giving a talk at AAM, and I worked with her on this project, and she said there are a couple things about significant change, reinvention. She said you've got to communicate. Sometimes it's in writing, sometimes it's with email, sometimes it's in a meeting. You've got to keep communicating when you're dealing with significant change. By the way, for those of you that have the book, the Reinventing book, the Cotter article at the back is excellent. It's the final article in the book. Co-create it. Do the solutions together. Don't do them alone. She talks about you got to build it together. And when you build it together, it's going to stand up and it'll tend to have more legs. versus being done by one. Prototype. Think about what you're doing. Let's give this a go. And I've been guilty of this. Well, it's got to be just right the first time it rolls out. Why? Why not? Try it. Try having the exhibit start in a completely different place than you've ever done it before. Or try sound and creating a lounge area in the exhibit. Maybe you've never done that before. So try it. So it turns out that they're the wrong couches, or it turns out that the flow isn't right. Change it. Then it kind of keeps you on your toes and engaged in the process of your institution. You could even ask for feedback from visitors. Stay the course. Oh boy, is she right about that. It's easy to throw that, you just go, oh, this takes so long. If you're doing significant change, it takes a long time. And, you can just go, I'm like so tired, or I'm done with it. So you have to create little short wins for yourself, and you need to celebrate them. Museums, well, institutions in general are terrible about celebrating. Celebrating. It can be little. It can be celebrating a staff person. It could be celebrating a great, event that you've put on. It's something really important. And then she says, just get used to it. Those are her words, not mine. Okay. Oh, I forgot. Oh my gosh. I just have to show you some more tools. Okay. Have you guys ever seen this? How many of you are familiar with Jim Collins' Good to Great? These are some tools that I'm just throwing out some ideas, some other entry points for conversation. And Jim Collins talks about that, the successful institution in this Venn diagram can identify these three things. What are you deeply passionate about? What drives your economic engine? And what can you be best in the world at? What do you think museums typically are the best at up there? Yeah, there's no shortage of the passion. Do they know this? Often they don't. And also this, which is much more of a strategic positioning element. So again, we can talk about access to the PowerPoint if people want to look at this. Okay. Remember you were thinking about your institution. How many of you have seen this? Aditz from UCLA did this chart about organizational life cycle. And what he talks about, this is, you're meeting in the garage or on somebody's kitchen table. Ooh, we've got this cool idea. And since we're talking about museums, for a museum. And, you go, oh, well, we could do this, we could do that. And so there's this phase, through infancy, the go-go, adolescence. I'm not a good person to talk about adolescence because I'm a parent of one right now, but this is high energy. It's all about the creation. It's about the ideas. It's about trying. It's about exploring. Then you kind of keep chugging up. And, this particular chart shows what can happen when things go awry. Infant mortality, I've got to talk to him about changing the wording on that. The founder of the family trap, premature aging, prime. Prime is not at the top of the bell curve, it's to the left of it. That's where you want to hang out. It just means you keep keeping it edgy and you keep trying, those things that keep you alive and engaged with your community, with the staff, and what you have to offer. But then, this is very dangerous. This is where your systems, your bureaucracy drive you, and the creativity and the reason, the purpose is completely diminished. How many of you, who'd like to talk about an institution? Let's not talk about the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art for a minute. And if you don't even want to name these, can somebody name an institution or refer to an institution? Where would you say they are? Is anybody willing to raise their hand? Yes, you.
And so I worked for a venerable historical society and museums.
Okay. Venerable.
On the East Coast.
Okay.
And when I came in to take leadership of them, I would say they were definitely and we're affectionately known throughout the community as the hysterical.
Oh, yeah, well, that's not good. So the point is, not tended to, this is where you're going, death. I mean, you will, you know, it starts, it kind of implodes, it burdens, and there's no life, nobody wants to go. I mean, all the signs, low attendance, low donors, you know, all those things. So, but you can be at, you know, why is that so hard to say? Aristocracy, and you can rescue it and come back over. But huge commitment, huge vision. You've got to get everybody to buy in, and it means probably along the way some people will have to leave the conversation because they're dead wood or they're not nurturing where the institution's going. Anybody else? Anybody worked for one of these go-go young places? Yeah, the back.
I don't work for one. I'm in the free choice program up in Corvallis with John Falk and Lynn Durkeen, and
Sure.
they do a lot with the Hatfield Marine Science Center. And I think that one is probably in the go-go phase because
Okay.
they're kind of reinventing themselves as more of a research in how people experience exhibits and things like that. The whole thing is becoming, I mean, they've got eye tracking cameras on a lot of the exhibits and things like that to really kind of, I mean,
So it's got
Take
kind of
apart.
a,
it's got this reinvigoration of energy and things going on there. So.
Nice. And that's something they've got to figure out how to hold on to, keep nurturing it. Because if you let go, you can lose it. That's great. One more example, or shall we move on? I'm going to move on. I can see you guys are, I'm starting to lose you a little bit. Whoops. Okay. I'm sorry. Can you see this? Kind of, sort of. This is about nonprofit sustainability. It's one of my favorite tools. Again, Alice, I think you've heard me talk about this one before. It's where you take all the things that you're doing and you map it out. So here's one trajectory, profitability, as in moolah, mission impact, okay? And then there are 4 quadrants. This is like, oh, let's go over here. This is high profitability and high mission impact. Bonanza, right? Or most likely. I mean, you always have to look at all the specifics. Over here, low mission impact, high profitability. Makes you go, why are we doing it if it's off mission? It might be, maybe some tweaking would resurrect that program or that activity. This one, high mission impact, low profitability. Sometimes there are things we have to do that are central to the mission, and we just have to find the funding somewhere else to continue to do them. But you can't have everything in that quadrant or you're going to be in trouble. But you can certainly have some things there. I'm trying to think. Like an internship program might be like that. But the gain is so high, and it's a role that you would play. Like I would imagine for your institution, the Jordan Schnitzer Museum, pretty central here on this campus with a museum studies program. This one, and I got to tell you, this is, some sacred cows live out in here. You know, oh, but we've always done it, you know, and well, is that why you keep doing it? If it's, you know, low on the profitability and low on mission, you should not be doing it. You should get rid of it. So these are just some tools that kind of support the prior conversation that I've been sharing with you. This is a fast way. I used this with a client, and they kind of did dots. They had they created their list of everything they did for the public, and then they mapped it out. And I think they were a little surprised where some of the bullets ended up. All right, strategic toolkit. Now we're getting kind of into the belly of the beast. This is the high desert. They asked me to come in, and some of you probably know Jane Ann Up. She's in your community, and she's going, oh, if you look at our collections, you'd think we were a historical society. And we just sort of have them. I want us to be very conscious of why we have them, and I want it to connect to what we're trying to do. Now, this up here, it's a Venn diagram again, can also, I'm sorry, it's a little hard to read. So through a process, and this is a work in progress, this is not done. I asked her if I could use it, and I told her I promised to tell you that, so it's important that you know. But they're trying, what they feel their role in the world is the future vitality of the high desert. They are perfectly suited to tackle that. But their collections are thin in some areas and strong in some areas. It's the overlap of the people of the region. You know, Native Oregonians, some of those Native Oregonians are Native Americans, some are immigrants that are here. These are all that changing community of people. The biota, we're going to change that word because it's too erudite, but it's the species, the plants and the animals of the region, and then the land, which is, as for all you know, it's spectacular. And actually, I didn't know this till I started working with them. The high desert goes as far down to, I think it's Baja, all the way up to British Columbia. And some of you who are savvy about it probably already knew that. I didn't. And that what they want to look at is the question of change and adaptability. So what is it, if you took those words out, what's that sweet spot for your institution? It can't be to show art. It can't be to teach people about science. That isn't going to do it. You've got to have a hook, and you have to do something that is full of vitality, that is relevant to who your institution is and where you're located. Now, I don't know about you, but I applaud them. They're trying hard. This is going to mean a mountain of work for them. The staff is now, I'm glad it's them, not me, they're going to start to test this. They're going through all their collections to see where it fits in this matrix and where their gaps are. You know, and they should. All right, this one. San Diego. This turned out, when I was working with them, to be something that was really important. They did not have agreement on their principles of operating. It's like a cousin of assumptions. They were in financial trouble. I don't know if you've ever been there, but their collections are mind-blowing. You know, they've got collections from around the world, and they're in need of care, but they have amazing stories to tell. So these are maybe wordier than I would like, but it was what they needed to get everybody on the same page, board, staff, and to be able to communicate to the public. So they say, we're creating a 21st century museum by connecting and responding to our communities in contemporary life. They had a panel about what was going on in the Middle East. They're about people, right? It's an anthropology museum, which is kind of a outmoded term. Also, they're called the Museum of Man. I said, okay, you're not changing your name while I'm working with you, but you gotta promise me that you're gonna change that name at some point. They said that they would. The human story through cultural artifacts, and they don't want to abandon the tenets of anthropology, so they call that out. And the voices that help us explore how we make meaning in the world. They're really working on their business model because they don't have a sustainable one. And they talk about leadership from within. Here is one that I thought was very interesting. Under the business model, they had some sub-bullets. The bottom was, philanthropic investors understand and have confidence in our ability to build a better community. It's on paper, it's called out, it's in their kind of document of strategic elements. Then further, they did values. And one of the things we did, we talked a little bit about institutional values earlier, but they had 6. Their values are adventurous, passionate, engaging, disciplined, open, accountable. So the chart that they created was, what does this look like in practice? Bingo. We can call these things out, but if we don't talk about how these values look in practice, whoosh, it evaporates. Does that make sense to you guys? And you know, and then they had a column about what do we need to implement to make sure that the values are core to how we work. All right, I'm going to move along here. Oh, I didn't plan to talk this long. I'm having too much fun. All right, this is another little tool. It's a decision tool. I was picking on Lisa. And I'm sorry, it's really hard to read. Sorry about that. That you could slot in your program or service activity, and then you could rate it. Does it support the mission, values, vision? Agree to disagree. This is the tool that they used. With some of my other clients, we've created other kinds of tools, but it's a way to measure and be very clear about what you're doing. Does this present a unique opportunity? Does this impact the strategic plan? And again, I'll give you this so the students, you guys can look at it. Idea at the end: eliminate, continue, modify, build. Don't add, explore, add, put on hold. The example we did with you, Lisa, might have been explore. Okay, moving right along. This is the new organizational chart for the Oakland Museum of California. I call it the flower power chart. They had a unique opportunity because they needed their financial situation with the city was at risk. So Lori Fogarty asked me to come over and work with them and to try to define, not only, they had the board working with the new MOU with the city. So it's now a full, complete 501c3. The board oversees the whole operation, and the city gives them some money for the care of the building and the collections, which belong to the city, okay? This is the Reader's Digest version of this. They had all these, it was the rake, right? There was this department, this department, this department. And Lori, this is what I mean about courageous and committed leadership, said, let's make it a 21st century. We blew it up, and we had staff involved. This was co-created. And at the middle is a visitor experience, public participation. Each of those centers, OMCA Lab, all the curators, experienced developers, evaluators, hang out there. Audience and civic engagement. Notice it's not called Education Department or Public Programs. Resource and Enterprise Center, some entrepreneurial activities, fundraising, you know, that whole financial engine, institutional support, HR, facilities. That's not such an unusual one. Creative Production Center is where all the graphics, exhibits, the things not just physical, but brand are created. And Collections and Information Access Center is the whole idea about public access to the collections. This is one of my favorite parts right here. Leadership Advisory Team. They have a staff of 120. Each year they pick, or people can volunteer to be part of this team for a 1 to 2 year stint, and their job is to nurture, care, and lead the organizational culture. And it's calling it out as a priority, and that gets back at one of my early points about it not being a priority. Whoops, uh-oh. Whoop. So here, notice how it's upside down from what you're used to seeing. Boards down here, they hold it up. Lori Fogarty's right there. Her executive team are the heads of each of those, giving her advice around supporting the priorities, and then the leadership team does their work. It's a work in progress. It took us 18 months to get from the old structure to this one. But it was exhilarating, and the staff really got into it. They had fabulous ideas. Those ideas are up there. And they're working on, right now they're tackling some of the volunteer structure that has not been completely re-envisioned to line up with this. And you notice that these are perforated lines with the idea that everything flows in and out. So if you're a staff member, you live in a center, but the work takes place and project teams that are made up of people from all over the institution. So it's a very different way of looking at it. So I wanted to share that with you. So I'm going to actually translucent car. So all I really want to close with, first of all, I want to thank you for being so patient and sitting here for longer than I expected to talk, but you were great and responsive and engaged. But this is a time for museums. The world has had a significant shift, and if museums don't embrace it and leadership doesn't step into the opportunity, we will see more museums close. And I don't know if you're aware, but a fair number have closed in the last few years because they were not connecting with their audience. They were not a part of the dialogue. They were not a part of what was happening in their community. So this conversation today is not just nice to have. It's really critical. And for those of you that are in the graduate program or undergrad, I mean, you're in a position, you're our future leaders. So you need, I just encourage you to embrace and challenge this. You challenge anything I said today. I'm totally open to that. But we have to challenge each other. We get complacent. We can't be complacent. If we're complacent, we're not going to be here. And that would be a sad day because the richness that exists in all our museums is part of our identity. It's essential, but we have to up our game. So with that, I thank you very much. And Phaedra, do I turn it back to you or take any questions? Any questions? Oh. Thank you. Any questions?
I have brain overload.
Yeah, Jill.
So you made a comment that if we think that exhibitions are the main way that we should engage audiences, we should rethink that. And I'm wondering what else you have to say about that.
Well, we could have a whole afternoon conversation on that. I think that one of the quickest ways to change it up, and Lisa's going to know exactly where I'm going with this, programs, engage things that don't have the high capital investment that exhibits do. There are ways to engage our audiences more quickly. Also, it's on-site, online, off-site. You need to think about all of those places, and it's a much bigger conversation. But I like going into museums where you can see the collections and you can pull out drawers and just get lost. I love that kind of thing. The next person is going to like that. At the Museum of Man, they did a skate culture exhibit. They actually put an actual skateboard ramp in the museum. You had to wait in line to get in. It was like a hot ticket item and vibrant, and the kids were in there. And then once they're in there, like, ooh, the Egyptian mummies are around the corner. Then you start to find out about all these other wonders. So I think it's about stepping back and looking at the formula and how many do we do and how do we do them. So it's like layers, Jill. I'm sorry, I can't give it. It's anyway. Another question? Yeah, at the back.
Institutions needing to be a partner in the vitality of their community. Yep. And I just wondered if you had some examples of how you've seen that work.
How I've seen it work? Notice there's a big pregnant pause here. This is not good. I know. Yes, they're perfect. You want to tell them about that? Because that's an excellent example.
Well, the Wing Luke Asian Museum in Seattle, I mean, they have done that in a number of significant ways. I think it started with their community-based exhibit program, which is legendary. It's extremely well organized, and they do 9 exhibits a year that are community-based. You make a proposal, and it's quite amazing how much they've done.
And they've been around, what, 20 years?
Well, the museum's been around a long time, but the Reinvented Museum's been around a couple decades. Ron Chu was the person who got it going. And the other big thing they did was when they relocated to a bigger space, it took a long time, but they acquired this very historically significant hotel where Chinese people had lived for many generations. So that building becoming, this museum, it's such a statement. And, I could go on.
Have any of you seen an example of a vital, what appears to you to be a reinvented museum? Oh, yeah. Talk about that. Good one.
The Pratt Museum in Homer, Alaska, is a major community partner in a lot of its exhibition process. Our most recent that we're putting up right now is the community participated in the rearticulation of a gray whale and helped with the installation process here this January, as well as the information that's within the exhibit, including oral tradition history, and on numerous other examples within the last decade that Alice has participated with, and many others.
They did it in an exhibit called Darkened Waters. It just went for it head on. What was the cost to wildlife with the oil spill, the cost to the community. That was, how many years ago was that?
Yeah, that's almost at least 15, if not 20. It's updated.
So their feet are very much on the ground and very connected with their community. It's great.
The redevelopment of the British Museum. Just putting a cafe in the lobby.
Yeah. You know what? That's a really good, thank you for bringing that. Sometimes the change is very small. You don't, the example I gave you of the Oakland Museum, that was huge. It doesn't all have to be huge. Sometimes it could be title changes for staff. It could be the cafe in the lobby. It could be that every staff member, this is one I always like, spends time on the floor. Every staff member. They talk to them. They make sure that they're having a good time. You have a question. Oh, you look like you're carrying too much. Can I help you? Now, that's not a capital campaign. That's attitudinal and a values proposition. All right. I'm going to release you into the world. I thank you for being such a great audience. And, Phaedra, do you want to say anything else? Okay. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming and to remind you that there are books available at the back, and Gail would be happy to sign them, I believe. Thanks again, and see you on February 1st.